Welcome to another edition of The Catholic View for Women. I'm Teresa Tomeo, along with my lovely co-hosts Elena Rodriguez and Janet Morana. You're probably familiar with the saying, garbage in, garbage out. Well, today, the ladies of The View are going to take an in-depth look at the shocking impact of media on you and your family. There has been so much talk, ladies and gentlemen in our viewing audience, and ladies here on set, right now because of this rash of shootings that we've had. And we looked at this in the last episode, the last edition of The Catholic View, but this particular study that we're going to look at from the Parents TV Council, which is one of my favorite resources that I quote in my first book, Noise, and many of my books, it's just mind-boggling what has happened. And they started looking at gun violence on TV, looking at, okay, Hollywood is saying we've got to crack down on guns. They're all the big stars in Hollywood. The Hollywood elites are out there marching and whatnot. And yet they work in an industry that promotes all sorts of gun violence. So the Parents TV Council went back from right before the Newtown, Connecticut shooting to see how Hollywood has been doing, and ended the study right before the Las Vegas shooting. And Janet, the results were just over the top, and not in a good way.
And you know, when you go back to the Newtown in Connecticut shooting, I mean, right away, just like with all these sad other shootings, right away, everyone points fingers at the the NRA, and this is why we have to have more limit on guns. But it's not, you know, it's not the guns are not causing the problem. It's the people who are getting the access to the guns. I mean, in some of these shootings, it was law-abiding citizens that had guns that helped those massacres not be as bad. Had they not, there was one church in Texas that other churchgoers actually had, you know, because in Texas you can carry, and they were able to stop the gunman from causing more damage. I mean, yes, unfortunately some people were killed, but had those law-abiding citizens not had their own guns with them, it would have been far worse. You know, so I think what happens is, you know, we have to look at these studies to say, where's the fault? Because right away, as you said, Teresa, Hollywood right away points at, you know, we shouldn't have guns and people shouldn't have guns. But look what they're producing on the TV shows. It's the movies, the TV, it's full of violence, you know, and that's what these surveys show.
And nobody's saying that we can't revisit the gun laws and look at maybe things can be handled a little bit differently or better. But they always single in on just one issue, and we have to look at a number of causes. You mentioned in the last show that we talked about violence, the problem with mental illness. And also the understanding that we've been taught, since all of this type of violence has started to occur more frequently in the last 10 to 15 years, see something, say something, even with terrorism. And yet every single time we see in these cases, there have been posts on Facebook. There has been some sort of a trail that those involved have left. And many of them, including going all the way back to Columbine, are very involved in using violent media on a regular basis.
That's right. And the problem is that if we allow our children to be exposed to this violent media, for instance, video games, at such an early age, they are so vulnerable. And so they are, apparently it's good because you have the child at home, then you can go do things, and the electronic device becomes the babysitter of this child and immediately attracts the attention of the child. But if the effect of that electronic device is so quick on the child, just think of how quick also the effect and lingering it is going to be the effect of that violence in your child at a very vulnerable age. And so watch a child, when a child is playing video games, watch the reaction of that child. Watch how that child goes from being a normally mannered, tempered young individual, and how the violence starts creeping in.
It's like a hyper-arousal.
And then every time it's more and more and more, so it grows into an addiction. So you have to stop it as quickly as you can, because it will become an addiction. The child is not as capable as the adults are to distinguish clearly between reality and the screen. Would you let your child be addicted to a substance in the way that you are allowing your child to be addicted to a violent video game? And then what is the behavior of your child after the exposure to the video game? And how long it takes for the child to go back to a normal level? So when we start noticing all this, we think we have to stop this immediately. And one way to do it is right at the home, cut it right from the base, and start withdrawing your child gradually, little by little, because if it is at the point of an addiction, you can't do it suddenly, but cutting back on the hours that child is allowed to be exposed to video. And you are the parent. You have God's authority to do this.
Right.
The child might question you. Older child might say, you have no right to do. You can't do that.
Oh, yes, you do. You're living in my house, as my mother used to say.
My house, my rules.
You better believe it.
My mother still tells me that. She's 92, living in assisted living.
I know.
I'm still your mother.
That's
what
right.
she says. Yeah.
My house, my rules. That's what I was told. Really.
But the research is what's so phenomenal. It's so
right.
overwhelming, connecting the dots. If you look at what we see out there, and this is what fascinated me when I first came up with the idea to do my very first book on media influence, which was called Noise, which we're going to mention as one of our resources for our homework. I was feeling the effect of being in the secular media for 20 years. I bought into a lot of the lies as a radical feminist, and I perpetrated a lot of those lies by just being in there and being a reporter and a quote-unquote journalist. So I saw the effect it had on me, and that led me to do research in other areas of media influence. And again, we go back to Columbine, and we talked about those two gunmen and their exposure to media violence. But the research connecting the dots between what we see on the airwaves, so whether it's violent video games or a film or a TV show, and how we react to it is overwhelming.
Well, Teresa, all your years, in doing secular broadcasting, the old phrase, if it bleeds, it leads.
If it bleeds, it leads.
And so what they're saying then, the people who help decide what gets on the air,
It
the bloodier,
attracts
the
attention.
better. That's right.
True.
And when you
I've
think
seen that
about
too.
it, that's what happens. Do you ever see what happens when there's a horrific accident on the highway?
Oh, yeah.
How everyone slows down on the other side because everyone has to take a look at what horrible thing happened over there. And that's why I think if it bleeds, it leads comes about, because they know people somehow are drawn to look at that violence.
And also, it's very cheap and easy to cover. For example, if you're in a major city or any size city, there's always going to be crime. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist or a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist to cover a murder story or a fire or something that, if it bleeds, at least it's got some blood and guts in it.
Right.
And it was just a matter of going there, putting up the live mast on the news truck, and doing story after story because it was cheap, again, and easy to cover.
Right.
And then people would watch it, and it'd be good visuals.
And black smoke rising.
Yes.
What I find
exactly.
interesting, Teresa, is, like you said, the Parents TV Council, they did the first big survey in 2013 after the Connecticut shootings. Now, they showed how terrible the violence was on TV back then. And there was an outcry. How did all these children get murdered, or this and that? And we've got to do something about it. There was an outcry. So you would think the TV industry and Hollywood would have toned things down. But now, after the Vegas shooting in October 2017, they amped it up. They amped it up. And you have to say, but why? But why? And of course, since then, from the 2013 to 2017, those weren't the only shootings. There were others. I mean, even as we're taping this program, we just heard last week of another shooting. And the violence just continues. And yet on TV and Hollywood, they continue. Here's the interesting thing I found on the study. They did this during what they call November sweeps in 2017. Now, they took the total number of original entertainment program, the total number of episodes, total number of episodes containing violence. Then they looked at the total number of episodes where violence occurred, but the episode's content rating did not contain a V descriptor, meaning violence, right? And then they took the total number of violent scenes, total number of scenes in which guns were present, and then the total number of scenes of gun violence in which guns were present and fired at human beings. Because, there's one thing when a gun is going to be firing and kill a deer, although I don't like to see Bambi go, but it's far different when this is direct shooting of a human being like that.
One thing, too, to mention, I know you're going to read some of the statistics, but people need to know this is broadcast TV.
Right.
So this doesn't even include the violent video games that we're talking about, or what else kids are getting on their cell phones or their iPads, whatever. Else
this is
just broadcast TV.
Prime
CBS,
time.
NBC, ABC.
This is the average flippy dial.
Right.
And it's not counting what's on the other cable networks.
Exactly. It's
which
just
is even worse.
television.
We're not talking about all those other cable networks, which, as we all know,
or Netflix or anything. This is broadcast TV.
This is just the major network broadcast TV, and to me, it's shocking. So here's some stats. In 2013, there were a total of 392 episodes of programming in their study, right? In 2000, and this is how many contained violence. In 2017, it went to 287 were in the study. Okay, so in 2013, almost half, 49% of the shows in the study period contained violence. Now you would say that's a lot. That's almost half of the episodes had violence. Now you would think it would go down. No. In 2017, well over half, 21% contained violence. So it went up again. It's like they don't learn. Again, in 2013, almost a third, 30% of the programs contained violence with guns. Okay, and then back in 2017, it went up to 39%. So it went 9% more.
Keeps going up,
Keeps
not
going
going
up,
down.
not going down. So you would think, you know, when there's this outcry all over the nation.
And from Hollywood.
And from Hollywood.
Or the people behind
the people
Hollywood,
behind
the actors
there
and
that
the
are
elites.
producing the
Right,
TV
right.
programming, they're all beating their breasts going, we got to do something about this. We have to stop this. And
Stop
yet,
making money from TV
stop
violence.
making money
Right.
from TV violence because it's going up and up and up.
Contradiction.
Also, then they said in 2013 there was a total of 934 violent scenes during this study period. All right, and then in 2017 there were 1,080. So once again, more than 100 more violent episodes in that same period.
So in this
Why?
last paragraph too, Janet, it's really interesting. So in 2017, the total number of violent incidents in 1 month of television, the percentage of programs containing violence, the percentage of programs containing violence and guns, and the percentage of violent programs with ratings that didn't adequately reflect the program's level of violence all increased.
Right.
In spite of the fact that there were fewer episodes of entertainment programming aired in the study period between 2017 than in 2013. So if you think about what's been happening in our country with all these different shootings, and that Hollywood claims to be so concerned about this issue, and yet what they're promoting is an increase in gun violence, and just on broadcast television, you can't have it both ways.
Right.
And there is a connection again, and we're seeing it, and we talked about it in the last show, between what happens when we consume all of this and how we live our lives. And this study, just let me give the study, Elena, real quick, is a dress rehearsal for tragedy from the Parents Television Council, and we're going to put that in our homework assignment. Go ahead.
And an example to what you just said is when we see tragically these mass school shootings or shootings at any other public place, movie theater, etc. Very short time later, we see copycats.
Right.
Right.
And so well, it's
What does that tell you?
indicative that
Right.
that the more you show it, the more it will be replicated in reality.
That's true.
Janet, you found a couple of really good articles that we wanted to talk about. Again, anybody listening who has any contact with children, whether you're a parent, grandparent, in education of some sort, maybe you're in teaching CCD, maybe you are somehow working in the schools, you need to look at this research because it's super, super important. So we have one from Psychology Today. This is your child's brain on video games, and then how playing video games may change the brain. And I know you wanted to read some quotes, and I have a quote also.
Go ahead, Teresa.
All right, this is a quote from How Playing Violent Video Games May Change the Brain. Okay, and this is from Time Magazine. This is a few years old. This is back in 2011.
Right.
So quite a few years ago. Researchers found that those who played violent video games showed less activity in areas that involved, and this is key, emotions, attention, and inhibition of impulses. Behavioral studies have shown an increase in aggressive behavior after violent video games. After violent video games, and what we show, the researchers say, is the psychological explanation for what the behavioral studies are showing. We're showing there are changes in brain function that are likely related to that behavior. So this is really important, involved emotions, attention, and inhibition of our impulses. So basically, if you translate that, desensitization to violence.
And it does have a physical action, a physical response inside your brain that you can't, there's no way you can go around that. There's nobody who can say, oh, well, I'm immune to that. It doesn't hurt me. I can get away with it.
Right.
And it will be having a very physical consequence as well in the body's reaction.
Right.
Well, once you reach that point, you're disconnecting your reasoning from your emotions. And then where is that going to lead you? You're opening up the door for more
all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
Well, there's the other article, which again will be in our homework from Psychology Today, and it says, this is your child's brain on video games. And they talked about how they did some case studies, and of course they do those scans where they scan the brain before the activity, and then they scan it immediately following the child, playing the video games. And they said it's almost like an addiction on drugs. You can see like the change in the brain and how the child, like, you ever watch when a parent's trying to tell the kid to stop playing that video game and come to the dinner table? And in this study, they followed like a couple of children. They said that the child actually became agitated, almost violently agitated at the parent calling them away from the video game. It became like almost like an addiction. And they said it's a change in the brain that does this. And so, you know, the word to the parents really is, what are you doing to your child? Because very often parents, unfortunately, and I'm not putting blame on parents here, because we understand a lot of families now both parents have to work. They pick the child up after school, you know, programs, and they bring them home and they're trying to get dinner, check homework. I get it. But you've got to pay attention to, are you allowing these devices to babysit your child? Instead of, while you're making that dinner and checking the homework, let them sit around the dinner table and talk to them about their school day.
Exactly.
What happened at school today? I mean, my kids always used to tell me nothing. You know, nothing happened at school today. But then you have to go a step further. Really, did your teacher do any math with you today? You know, you kind of have to pull further.
Open up the dialogue.
Open up the dialogue. Talk to them. But instead, they pick up those devices or let them go into their room with their Game Boy, their Nintendos, or all these other things. And what they're doing is they're putting them into this fantasy world of like shutting down and getting into this addiction that they just can't put it down.
There's a disconnect with reality because there are no consequences in this fantasy world.
We were talking about that in preparation for the show. If you remember, I was mentioning that when I was a reporter, I would cover a lot of news stories. We were mentioning if it bleeds, it leads. And yet what happened is if we would go to the actual scene, you'd see somebody get arrested, right? And somebody hauled in the court for the arraignment. But we never followed the case through. And so it looks very dramatic. It looks like one of those crime shows. And so the kids see this and they think, and they associate crime with excitement. And, you know, this is a good, right. I remember one of the rap stars from Detroit got arrested because of some weapons violations or something, and it was big news, and everybody, all the kids thought it was really cool that so-and-so was being hauled off to court to be charged, but they never saw the fallout of those charges. He did end up going to jail for a few months, if I remember correctly, this particular rap star. But so when you don't actually show the reality of what happens when you're committing these crimes or involved in these violent acts, there's no consequences, as you said. Yeah. Well, we have more to talk about when we come back. We've already done a half show. I can't believe it went by so quickly. But we have some specific ideas for you and also some really good resources. And, you know, the church doesn't say throw the baby out with the bathwater. The church has been teaching on the media, especially since Vatican II and in Marifica. There's so many great documents, the World Communications Day statements, that help us really use the media wisely. I mean, we're all in media, so we're not saying that all media are bad, but there really is something true to that saying, garbage in, garbage out. We'll talk more about that on this edition of The Catholic View. We'll be right back. Welcome back to The Catholic View for Women. I'm Teresa Tomeo, along with Elena Rodriguez and Janet Morana. Garbage in, garbage out. Very true. We're diving into some of the profound research that's out there in the secular world, backing up what the church has taught us about balance and moderation. The church knows that we need the media, and the church actually teaches that we should use the media and use it wisely to evangelize. But it's gotten so out of control. There's a statistic that shows that adults, and I'm not talking about young people now, I'm talking about adults, consume 10 to 12 hours of media a day. That's half a day. That's half your day involved in media somehow. Mostly it's a cell phone, but think about that. 10 to 12 hours. Now, I'd like to think they're all watching EWTN during that, even though there's so much great programming they should be watching, but that's not the reality of the situation.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
And like we were saying earlier, the devices are really being used like as babysitters, you know, and like I said, I'm not faulting working moms. You know, I was a working mom. My daughters are. It's busy. It's hectic. It sure is. But you've got to take that time when you get in the door with everyone. They're unpacking their school bags. First thing is, why don't you go through their school bag? I know as a teacher, there's a homework folder. Talk to them about their homework. I mean, before they start with all these devices and you know, looking at the games or go and play in the Nintendo, talk about their schoolwork first. Let's see what the homework is. Look at the folders. See if there's any notes from their teacher. You know, how many parents are taking that time? One family I saw was really cute. At their front door, they had this table and they had a big basket. And when the kids came in the house, they had to literally drop, if they're old enough to have a cell phone, their iPads, like all the devices went into the basket there, and they were told later if they were allowed to use
Or
their
if they
iPad.
needed it for homework or something
Or
like that.
something,
Right.
but it was basically like a check station, okay? It goes here, plugged in, charged, okay. And that's where the devices stayed. And I said, you know, that was a good idea. Because otherwise they sit down, because school, you can't use the devices in school unless it's, you know, an approved thing that they're using in the classroom. And here this family said, no, that's where the devices get checked when they come home. And I think that's a good piece of advice.
Yeah, I remember I was in the airport, and you and I, and we all travel a lot, right? And I'm always a people watcher, especially as a reporter and as a journalist. And I think it was when Deacon Dom and I were heading over to Italy for a pilgrimage, but we're in Detroit Metro Airport, and we saw this lovely family, beautiful, you know, typical American family, little boy, little girl, just lovely family. And they sat down near us, and we were in a restaurant getting something to eat before we boarded the plane. And the whole time they were there, which was about 45 minutes, they ordered their food. That's the only time they spoke to each other. And then each of them, both the mom and dad and both kids the parents were on their phones and the kids were playing with some sort of item, whether it's an iPad or whatever. And they stopped a few minutes to eat, but they didn't speak to each other. And then they went right back on those devices after they got done eating, and then when they decided it was time to go, they went off with no conversation. And one of the points in the homework, by the way, Janet, you mentioned here to really schedule time with the family and limit the time in the use of electronics, correct?
Exactly, exactly. You know, and in doing so, you know, like I said, you know, I get it, busy families, but let's just use EWTN for example, right? When you come home, instead of watching the secular TV that we just proved to you has all this violence, EWTN has such good children's programming.
There's a whole strip of children's programming that you can go to the EWTN website and check the times for your area. Or you can use the EWTN app and then play those shows at your convenience when you need your children to be watching them. It's fantastic. And you know that is safe. That
it's safe. There's no gun violence on EWTN programming.
Not only will there not be violence, but they will be learning as they have fun.
About
They'll be
faith-filled.
Faith-filled. And what about using also the EWTN program, like they have the Rosary with the Sisters, or they have the Divine Mercy Chaplain. I mean, there's so many different tools that are on the network that your parents could be using.
And also a lot of, and I know you've probably heard this too because you produce in radio as well as TV, but Dr. Ray and I, Dr. Ray Grundy is also one of our radio hosts here at EWTN. We laugh because lots of times kids will tell us, oh, you're that voice that I hear in the morning, and they'll say, I don't like that Dr. Ray because he's always telling my mom how to discipline me. So the kids get into it if they're listening to it and they discuss the things that are on radio and TV. Yeah, but we want them to take, Janet, a look at the Parents TV Council study, correct?
That's right, yeah. As part of your homework, we will have the link on our website. Take a look at that study we just quoted some of, and talk about it to your other friends, you know, really. Because maybe they're not aware of the things we're telling you on this program, and you can help other families that you come in contact with, that your children play with.
Your children will be exposed to those families.
Exactly, and of course, Teresa's book, Noise, is fabulous. This is great. There's a lot of stuff here on the media. It's how our media-saturated culture dominates lives and dismantles families.
That's my first book, and it's one of my most popular.
And it's available at the EWTN Religious Catalog. And this should be read cover to cover, and get out your highlighter and really highlight different points.
A lot of research in there.
A lot of research was done by Teresa. And of course, we said set. Number 3 on your homework is set, schedule, and limit times kids' use of electronics. We've already been talking about that. But first of all, the electronics, get it out of their bedroom. Absolutely, no TVs in the bedroom, no TVs on in the bedroom.
No phones.
Electronics in the bedroom.
And, you know, in the computers, you got to lock them down that they can't get to certain websites, because we know porn and all this other stuff, it's out there like trying to entice the kids in.
And use that time you're not using for electronics.
To talk to kids.
To talk to your kids or assign them a chore around the house where they'll be getting some benefit from it. And
then of course number 4 is going to be a reminder to set one central location for the computer in the home, okay, and remove access to, like we just said, in the bedrooms. No, nothing in the bedrooms, no electronics in the bedroom. And of course, I just want to point out, you know, we have the Kitchen Madonna here, and this is about what Mother Angelica already said, keeping the holy reminders around your home. That will also help greatly. And of course, the Kitchen Madonna has beautiful symbolism, and she's available at the EWTN Religious Catalog, and I can tell you, we all have them in our homes, and people remark about, and it does keep the conversations on point when they're looking at Our Lady.
Talk about
sitting at the kitchen table,
images.
you know? And of course, finally, go to our website, thecatholicviewforwomen.com, sign up for our e-letter, and of course, past episodes and information homework is up there. And of course, like us on Facebook.
The media can be used well and wisely. We're not saying that all media are bad.
No.
Don't misunderstand, because obviously we're coming to you via television, right? And also also
EWTN
the internet.
is everywhere.
Some people, if they're watching us online. But we want you to have some information that can help you make a difference in your family and your lives, because it is true, garbage in, garbage out. Thanks for watching The Catholic View for Women. We'll see you next time.